Welcome back. Coffee is always necessary. Before the break, Maurizio asked me to explain the interaction, the difference, the relationship between the IAB and the ACCA. The ACCA being one of the chartered accountancy bodies. And obviously the ACCA and other chartered bodies are already present in Latin America. We are not in competition with the ACCA. We know each other very well, but we have slightly different markets and different approaches. We believe in the ACCA. The ACCA is great. It is great if you are talented, if you already have some financial skills or mathematic acumen. It is great if you have time to dedicate to your studies. It is wonderful if you are wealthy and healthy, because it takes a long time and things can happen, and it is a one-way road to get to the top, to get the cream of the cream. Everybody wants the cream, yes? But not everybody can have the cream or get to the cream in the same way. People can fall off because of health, financial, professional reasons, or realize, and this happens a lot, or realize that they cannot do it. They are not bright enough. They do not have the relevant skills to get to the top. So what we do as the IAB, yes, is again, it's our level by level approach, where people can go up the ladder, but step by step. And there is no need to start at level 1. People can come in. People can come in at level 2 or 3 or 4 if they meet the entry requirements. So they can come in here, 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 or here. And the beauty is, if a young person, for example, does level 2, level 3, level 4, completing level 3, they will be accepted by the ACCA. So they know that they do have the enthusiasm and the ability to begin this climb. If they have completed level 4, they will receive some exemptions, so they can have a good step on the ladder. So basically, we have a dynamic relationship and interface with ACCA. And as we said before, working professionals cannot contemplate coming in and doing this at a certain point in their career. So if the government requires that they need to provide proof of professional competency, this is not a solution for them. But this or this could be a solution. What often happens is that in this world of ours, to speak very dramatically, the government fix new requirements for the professionals, because they want the professionals to meet a professional level, or they want to fall into step with the international world. So they can say that we are as good as country X or country Y. Or they know that they need to introduce the skills so as to respond to the emerging economy requirements and to improve the skills in the labour market. But the same governments or authorities responsible are happy to introduce the requirements, but they are perhaps not so good or not so competent to introduce the skills solutions, how the professionals can achieve the skills in a practical and convenient and time-effective manner. And that is where they refer to us, because our qualifications here and at the IAP level can respond to those circumstances. How was that, Malcolm?
Sounds good.
Yes. Any questions on that aspect before we continue? Because it is an important aspect to have clear in your minds. Oh, where's our microphone? One moment. We've lost our mic now. Do we have the microphone for the gentleman? Yes.
¿Cuál sería la relación desde el lado de la práctica de IFRS con IASB? ¿Cuál es la relación? ¿Cuál es la relación de ellos con el IASB? International International su relación, ¿cuál es su relación con International Accountant Standard Board?
What is the relationship between IAP and the International Accountant?
Good question, thank you. It's how am I say it? It's not a bad relationship. We don't have a close relationship with them. I know personnel of the IASB, and I do know that they like what we're doing, because they're wanting education in this field to be encouraged in the various countries that are in the process of adopting or implementing the standards. So the relationship is, as I say, not a close one, but that's not to say that it should be or needs to be. I hope that answers the question. Yep, okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Any more questions before we continue? Here we have a question.
My question is regarding to the IFRS and your opinion about the picture you have about Mexico and Latin countries. Considering, for example, that if you know, Mexico doesn't use the IFRS gaps. We have Mexican gaps, local gaps, and in other countries the infrastructure or the economics are not as big as the European countries. So what is the picture you have in UK in order to use the IFRS in Latin countries?
Can you just say the last part of that?
What is the picture or the opinion you have about using IFRS in economies as Latin countries?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a very good question. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge. It's not an easy one. I'm going to be talking in a few minutes about the case study in India. India, for example, is on a path to implement IFRS in 2016 and 2017. 2016 for publicly quoted companies and 2017 for the other companies. Now, when companies adopt IFRS, the usual way is to incorporate those standards in their own. So if you take Mexico as an example, the current Mexican financial reporting standards will be changed through the government to reflect IFRS. So they have to be incorporated. This is a problem, as I see it, because Mexico, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, and so on, when they adopt the standards, unless they do so wholeheartedly, you can still get some differences, particularly within some IFRS. There are choices. And some countries may make it mandatory to use one approach as opposed to another approach. So whilst it complies with IFRS, when you are educating people, that is a problem. So, from our perspective, and back to the IASB, an effective training is one in IFRS. Particularly if accountants are going to produce sets of accounts or interpret those of other companies from other countries, they need the whole IFRS understanding, not just in the way they've been implemented in one country or another. Does this make sense? Is this what you were thinking about, or?
I think one of the problems that usually we find in our works of auditing in this kind of IFRS rules are the fair value. No? It is difficult for the companies to use and introduce these kinds of valuation of their assets or debts, and this is very difficult to implement in Mexico, for example.
I think it's both an internal question, but it's also an international and a business development question, which is not wholly dependent upon the prevailing national dictate. I was in Lithuania last week visiting our centre there, and we had meetings with the auditory bodies and the governmental auditory department regulator. Yes? And although the standards adopted in Lithuania are quite similar to IFRS, there are some missing links. And the effect of these missing links is crucial when it comes to inward investment, because the inward investor fails to understand totally the accounts and the actual situation of companies which they can cooperate with. And this can result in the companies deciding not to invest. And of course, once the company decides to invest and they have an international aspect, they are looking for firms and they are looking for practitioners who can respond to their international needs, i.e. preparing reports in compliance with the IFRS. So, it may not be a compulsory element at the moment, but it is certainly an intelligent move to incorporate in one's professional capacity this type of ability so as to be able to offer yourself on the market. Yeah, unless there are any further questions, we will continue with the program. I will move my drawing. We have a question.
Con algunos amigos hemos pensado que la contabilidad poco a poco está reuniendo los postulados de una ciencia. El hecho de que exista tantas corrientes o puntos de vista, ¿qué no nos aleja de esto? Dado que la tecnología y los instrumentos ya nos pueden dar la información de momento. Recordemos que la contabilidad es el lenguaje común o universal de todos los negocios, ya sean públicos o privados. ¿Esto no nos aleja de esa realidad?
El concepto de fair value.
He's wondering if the fair value concept moves away from this concept.
It's a good question, and I can tell you this is one that's debated everywhere I go. It's Jeff said, you know, in a sense, IFRS should lead us to the same language. But I said earlier about also choices that can be made within standards. So it really requires, if this is going to work in terms of fair value, it requires even more notes to financial statements than we've had in the past. And that will be absolutely, and is absolutely essential. And therefore, of course, readers of accounts, financial statements, need to look at the detail, as in those notes, not just bare figures. That's fine for accountants, because we collectively, and particularly you more than me, you're the practicing professionals in this field. But if you're a CEO or a director or an investor, without that understanding of how these differences can exist and the importance of those notes and what those notes mean, you could make some big mistakes. So, back to IASB, our colleague here and the question he raised earlier. It's something the IASB and governments around the world have now committed to IFRS. IFAC, representing all the accountancy bodies, to cooperate with each other to see how we can still take the IFRS forward. Do you agree with that perhaps, or? Yeah? Thank you. Okay. Okay, we're going to have a little break from IFRS for a short while, and we'll be going back to it in terms of IFRS training and the need for professional training in this field. I want to step back and look at what the need for skills is nationally, internationally, and so on. I came across this interesting, I think, policy paper written a long time ago now, 1991, but I think is still absolutely valid now. Perhaps if you could read that and translate, yeah? Could you translate the points? Thank you. Okay, so for me, I don't know about you, but that seems like common sense. Yes, that seems to me like common sense. We've got to have flexible workforce. We're now talking about even the rate of technological change is increasing. The rate is increasing. And so this 1991 policy paper, in a sense, is even more true. So the challenge is, how do we create this flexibility? And I would like to share with you in a moment some mistakes that we've made in England. I'm not talking about Scotland, I'm talking about England, but it's probably true in Scotland as well. Mistakes we made in trying to address this issue. Mistakes we made in trying to address this issue. But then to talk then about solutions. Could you just please now, translate this now, the second bullet point from the policy paper? Thank you.
Los retos son para el empleador privado y para el público. Las capacidades de entrenamiento efectivas para entrenar a los trabajadores en sus trabajos y para hacer eso de manera eficiente, para desarrollar las economías fuera de la pandemia, a través de un cambio tecnológico y la apertura a una competencia internacional.
So, interesting. Many countries, including the UK, our approach has always been top-down. Government rightly takes responsibility. It's concerned about the competitiveness of the economy. So it tries to impose solutions. But this policy paper is talking about a combination, not a state solution, not a state solution on its own, but it's calling for using employer, private and public training capacities. And without that combination, in my opinion, I would agree with this, it's impossible to create a flexible workforce and to respond to the changing knowledge and skills needs. And there's one more point from this policy paper, if you could just quickly translate that one. Again, this is the World Bank, this is not Malcom Trotter speaking. But this is consistent with my experience. It's not that I'm anti-public sector solution. I worked in a state college for 14 years. But my experience in the UK and now obviously international experience is that without this working, the state cannot solve the problem. And the skills requirement will get bigger. Another point on the screen. Could you just translate that for me? Thank you. So, the skills gap I've talked about there. So this is of course the difference between the skills available and the skills that are required in the economy. It's a huge topic of conversation in the UK, in the US, just as much as it is in any so-called developing economy. In fact, I don't think there's any difference at all. It's simply, maybe there are more established structures and cooperation in developed economies, but the problem is exactly the same. And perhaps even more so because where you have a very developed state education system, there's often an assumption or huge reliance or expectation that the state system will produce people who will have the knowledge and skills. But I can tell you that in the UK, there is a common complaint amongst employers. People coming out of school, people coming out of university. In fact, two big criticisms. They can't write effectively, they can't present themselves well, and they don't have the technical application of knowledge and skills that the employer requires. It's not such a big problem for large employers because they have training programs and resources. But for medium and smaller and micro businesses, this is a huge problem. So our problem in the UK, is no different, in my view, to any developing economy. I also came across this in the Harvard Business Review only 3 years ago. But perhaps you could just translate the quote for me. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that one, and now another one.
Para no agregar un estimado a la falta de trabajadores con medianas habilidades existe, el número se espera que crezca sustancialmente, así como los baby boomers se han retirado. El problema es que más agudo es en los campos de los aeroespaciales, donde el 50% de esos trabajadores son elegibles para retirarse para el año 2020 y probablemente van a dejar sus trabajos por otras personas. Y esto aflige a otras industrias también.
So this is a country that the world over, we look up to in terms of being a developed nation, developed economy. Some fantastic universities, what they call community colleges. But yet, they've got this problem. So, one final point. Thank you. Just picking up on a phrase they use in here and in the previous quote. middle skills range. Earlier we were talking about what's the relationship perhaps between IEB and ACCA. ACCA qualification is at auditor level. The world over, external audit is getting less and less and less. But there's a hole in the middle for middle skills. The people who, if you like, do the regular work. The people perhaps that you as owners or partners in accountancy firms the people you employ to do more routine activity but still needs technical knowledge and skills. And the same in firms. And we often use another term, intermediate skills. Oh, sorry, I would like you to translate one more quote actually. I was going to skip it, but this is really important.
Realmente, esto puede suceder es una escala suficientemente larga, son líderes de negocios o quedan unos con otros, y las instituciones de educación, ambas regionales y nacionales. Las palabras claves son cooperar y cooperar nacionalmente.
Yep, thank you. If there's only one thing I would add to this, you're probably guessing the word. Internationally. Yeah? This is what this is about. You know, we feel, hopefully, we have something to add. Because of the education and training expertise that hopefully we can bring. And our experience of helping in other parts of the world in this field, cooperating with your local expertise and your professional technical ability in accounting, we can improve both the performance of your own practices but also, more importantly, your clients. And perhaps, like KPMG I mentioned earlier in Oman, you can have a vision to cooperate in the community. Perhaps you can add value to universities by forming a partnership arrangements. Jeff mentioned this earlier. Or with state colleges, if there are colleges, business schools. Or with large corporate employers. This is the sort of thing our centres do all around the world. Because they have the expertise and those institutions often don't have it. And that's not a criticism of universities or college lecturers. I used to be one. Their strength is educational understanding and academic understanding. But they can't possibly keep up with the professional experience and expertise that you have. And that's where this powerful cooperation that's mentioned here becomes a really good solution. I said I'd say a bit more about England. I don't want to be too negative. But we have tried several times in terms of government to impose solutions. Each one has failed. And we have a situation now which is getting quite concerning. 5 years ago, 2010, and 15 years ago in the millennium, 2000, year 2000, this 2020 vision was created, as it's referred to here. And common sense was that in 2020, the skills needs due to technological change will be different from the needs in 2010 and 2000. And so the concern was there would be an increasing skills gap. And governments have tried to solve the problem itself. But that really didn't work. And so in the last 5 years, a different approach has been taken. And the approach now is for government to focus on setting an environment in which cooperation and private sector solutions can flourish. They recognise that government is always behind the curve. Business, private industry, private business is always trying to anticipate where we're going. And government recognise that setting qualifications itself, by the time the qualification came into the market, it would usually be 2 or 3 years out of date. So, the IAB, as an example, is seen as a good partner by government because it's made up of professionals who run their own businesses, who are setting standards, and by having that environment, dynamic environment, I mentioned 180 regulated awarding organisations. This is much more likely to succeed in terms of equipping people with the right knowledge and skills for the future as well as now. just want to focus on the third point, because we've talked about the other two already. Perhaps you could read the third point for me. Thank you.
Agregar un valor a la educación universitaria a través de incorporar conocimiento técnico profesional y habilidades a sus programas. Crear relevantes posgrados de ocupaciones y de profesionales calificados como una alternativa a tradicional trabajos profesionales. Una ruta académica a través de la educación. Mejorar las habilidades de la gente que deja las escuelas y del graduado de la universidad una vez que ellos hayan empezado sus trabajos.
Okay. So, these are the three solutions. The three solutions that we see as enabling the skills gap to be closed. And this is the kind of arrangements that we are trying to foster around the world. Okay, thank you. So now moving on specifically to financial skills, and then I'll move on to IFRS skills. So financial skills, just 2 bullet points there. Perhaps you could translate them for me. Thank you.
El correcto tiempo de resultar tus recursos financieros es crítico para la sobrevivencia del negocio y para su crecimiento, así como para cumplir con las obligaciones de impuestos. En una encuesta realizada a los dueños de miles de pequeños negocios en Gran Bretaña, en la cual la dificultad de esto fue lo que vino como primer punto de preocupación.
Okay, I'm going to show another slide in a moment, but just firstly that first point. It's an obvious point, accurate and timely financial information. But how many micro businesses and small businesses have that information in that way? It would be pleasing for me to hear that, for you to say to me that in Mexico all the businesses are always, no, it's not a problem. But certainly in England it's a big problem, as you'll see in a moment. So this survey of several thousand business owners, they were asked to identify what was their kind of biggest difficulty or range of difficulties. So which one came out top? Yeah, so it wasn't winning new customers. It wasn't negotiation. It wasn't even managing people. I find this the most difficult. Micro and small businesses, this is their big problem. The number of my members who say, the trouble is, my client, they come to me when it's too late. They come to me when there's a problem. they could save themselves actually some money by spending more money on my services on a regular basis, helping them to produce accurate information, monthly management accounts, appraising their plans for investment during the financial year, rather than coming to me at the end of the financial year or when the problem starts. Or I should say, when the problem becomes clear to them. So we've established this is a big problem. You have a solution partly through your own services. Bookkeepers and accountants are reinventing themselves, but particularly accountants where their audit work has reduced. In UK, the audit threshold is $10 million approximately, US dollars. So in small and medium firms now, there's no need for audit. It may be a good idea to assure your systems through external audit, but the reality is most businesses don't have one. What they do need though, and will benefit from, is I've gone, I don't know where I've gone now. Where have I gone? What they will benefit from is solution to this. And as I say, you can provide two solutions potentially. One is to demonstrate to them value for money, producing from the outside, or acting as we would call it a virtual financial director. Producing those regular monthly accounts with some kind of commentary, helping the business owner to make sense of what's happening, perhaps against the budget. Maybe they don't have a budget. Maybe they don't have a cash flow forecast. But that's the added value on a regular basis you can offer. And then secondly, I was going to say the other one is training. Training for them to keep better records. And doing that part of the job really well. And that's actually bookkeeping. But you can train them to do that, and you can train them on how to interpret and understand accounts. So that you can have a meaningful conversation with them. Jeff wants to ask something.
Thanks, Malcolm. Just to give Malcolm a breather, an opportunity to recoup. I would just like to sum up this session. Apologies. I would just like to sum up this session. And obviously Malcolm is an expert in the technical aspects of all. And my role is the marketing man to point out the advantages which a cooperation with IAB could bring. I think it has been interesting here to see the range of activity whereby the training can take place either at university level, even in the final years of school, yes, and in the field of working with other practices, with other companies and small, medium-sized enterprises. The particular relevance of filling the skills gap in this large area of small, medium-sized enterprises and micro businesses, and the essentiality of it, and whereby the private sector providing private training solutions can be ahead of governmental action, not only interpreting it but setting the pace. Before Malcom concentrates on the relevance of IFRS and we look at the Latin American scenario, are there any questions on this section of work which we have, or which Malcom has presented? Or how it could be of benefit or relevance to you in expanding your own business and reaching out to your client base with training solutions? No? We're happy on that one? Great. Malcom, you're back in action.
Thank you, Jeff. Back in action. So, moving now more to IFRS knowledge and skills specifically. This slide is focusing on who needs this information, who needs to understand IFRS. It's not just accountants. So the first point there, the trouble is with IFRS, it brings a whole new language. Although in the UK we implemented IFRS in 2005, it was compulsory for listed companies. 10 years later now, micro and small businesses are going to be forced for the first time to change the language that they use in financial statements. I think the government and the IASB had hoped that smaller entities, non-listed companies, would adopt the IFRS for their financial statements, or they would adopt the IFRS for SMEs. Because as you probably know, there is a single standard, IFRS for SMEs, which is effectively a combination of selected IFRSs and put into one. But government and IASB have been disappointed. Over the 10 years since IFRS were implemented, I don't know what the percentage is, but it must be less than 5% of SMEs have changed their reporting into IFRS format. because it wasn't mandatory, and they could choose to continue with GAP. So national standards. And to keep the same language. So in the UK, if you talk to a business owner, they will still talk about stock and not inventories. And non-current assets, no, they will talk about fixed assets. They're still using the traditional language. But from January next year, that's going to change. Government has brought in a new national standard incorporating parts of the IFRS for SMEs. And it becomes compulsory, of course, to follow national standard. And the language is now changed. So the business owner is going to be receiving financial statements produced by their accountant with words on it that they won't understand. But even more so, some of the figures will look different to what they would have perhaps expected. They will make comparisons and they will say, well, why is my profit a lot more or a lot less than I expected? Because it's impacted by the change. How will they understand? This is why the first bullet point there on the screen, I talk about employers, business owners, needing to have an appreciation of IFRS. So there's an opportunity to run seminars, 2-hour session maybe, at business clubs, networking meetings. You can present yourself as an expert. You might get more clients. And you see that training opportunity. Yeah? Just a simple thing like that. That doesn't lead to one of our qualifications. I'm just pointing out a need. But the second and third bullet points are about university students needing to be trained in this. How are the academic lecturers going to be able to teach this to their students? This is where I said earlier about perhaps a partnership between you and them. And of course, the third bullet point is the obvious one. It's what's happening here, and it's what will be happening ongoing. You're all very well aware of that. Okay, let's move on. I think a simple reading of this slide, if that's okay, because most of these are self-explanatory. Thank you.
accionistas y el intercambio de se sigue refiriendo al como el original nombre de accounting standards, los estándares de contabilidad, como IAS.
Thank you, yeah. So I think most of that is self-explanatory. I don't need to talk about it. The last bullet point is an interesting one, because sometimes I talk about international accounting standards, and this demonstrates to some extent the confusion and lack of understanding that exists even amongst professionals. And people say to me, but there aren't no, there are no more IAS. It's all IFRS now. I say, no. Most of the 40 international accounting standards are still in existence. There have only been 15 IFRS created. It's simply we've changed the name of them, the language. But as I say, this comment even comes from accounting professionals I come across in the UK and around the world. So, it's a small point but important, I think. I've lost my co-presenter, he's languishing at the back. So I'll do this slide for him until he arrives at the front. It's yours actually, Jeff. So Jeff's just going to talk about the users of this information, I think, just briefly. Or shall I do it? Do you want me to do it? Yeah. It's a simple. It's a simple analysis of why this is important or who's it's important for. So in Mexico, of course, the banks, any financial institution, they are usually the first ones that are made to adopt and use IFRS. So banking staff have to at least have an appreciation if you're a manager. Other people involved in the financial field, investments, financial markets. Anybody involved in international business, because of this comparability. And people think it's simply about, mergers and takeovers or making investments. But actually it's not, is it? It's about supply chains. I was asked this question in India a few months ago. Why do business studies students doing MBAs or bachelors, were they going to be marketing managers? What do they need to know about IFRS? And there isn't an obvious connection. But if you're a marketing manager, or a buyer, or a sales manager, you are interested or you are connected either with customers or with suppliers. You're going to be entering into contracts with those businesses. So of course you work in partnership with your head of finance, your finance director. but you want to be able to understand who am I doing business with? Is this company a solid financially based company? Because you want to assure your supply chain. Fantastic example, of course, would be the car industry, where you have hundreds, if not thousands, of course, components. And if you have a problem in your supply chain, it can disrupt the whole production of the vehicle. So you only want suppliers who are financially resilient. And so you may even want management accounts, not historical accounts, management accounts from suppliers produced in IFRS, so that you are assured of current sustainability of your supplier. Okay, does that kind of make sense to you? So it's not just accountants that need to know this stuff, that need to know all about IFRS. It's people in these other roles. Over to you, Jay. Next slide.
In fact, one of the other qualifications we have is financial information for non-finance managers. Because often in the world of work and promotion within companies, a manager may receive promotion and be responsible for financial aspects, but not have the know-how, not have the fundamentals of finance. So that is another bite chunk qualification which we offer. So with Malcolm's presentation here, we have tried to illustrate the relevance of IFRS. And as the IAB, this is one of our flagship programs and qualifications. And it is the one which we have already translated into Spanish, so as for you to be able to deliver it here. Malcolm, have you got a copy of one of the Level 4 book there? I would just like to show you one of our books. So, this in fact is the Level 4 study text. As you see, it's quite a thick book and it's divided into units. You will see that there is a lot of study cases and practical applications of principles. And it comes also with specimen study cases and specimen exam papers. And it is this book which we have translated into Spanish. So this is the one which is relevant to IFRS. I will pass it round later. We will leave it here for you to have a look at in English. And then later on in these 2 days, we will be showing you how this book works and how training centres can deliver it. But now this slide talks about the specific needs of Mexico and not Los Angeles, but Latin America as vis-a-vis IFRS. It is silly for me to explain this for you, because it's a little like asking the grandmother or teaching the grandmother how to suck eggs. So it's much better if the input comes from yourself And we have asked one of the attendees today if he can give a short 2-minute or 5-minute overview of IFRS. Thank you.